The gas station lights flickered against the cold night rain, casting eerie shadows on the soaked pavement. He saw her, huddled near the vending machine, trembling in silence, her hoodie pulled low. Something about the fear in her eyes made him pause. She didn't belong here. Not with those bruises. Not with that silence. He offered her his coat. She flinched, but took it. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more videos like this. Let's begin. It was past midnight, and Mason Carter just wanted to grab a protein bar and be home before his 10-year-old son, Caleb, realized he'd forgotten the orange juice again. Life as a single dad wasn't easy. Mason worked construction during the day, stocked shelves at night, and somewhere in between, tried to keep Caleb smiling. But that night, everything changed. The gas station at Route 29 was supposed to be empty, quiet. Instead, he saw her, curled up behind the ice chest, her jeans soaked and hands trembling like leaves in wind. She looked about 25, but something about her posture, tight, guarded, like an animal backed into a corner, made her seem much younger. "Hey," Mason said softly, kneeling beside her but not too close. "You okay?" She jerked up like she'd been electrocuted. Her eyes were wild, scanning the road behind him. Her voice was raspy, barely a whisper. "Please, don't call anyone. I'm just waiting for a ride." Her lie was terrible, obvious. But Mason didn't push. Instead, he shrugged off his jacket and handed it to her. "You're freezing. Take it." She stared at him for a long second. Then, slowly, she reached out and pulled the coat around her shoulders, burying her face in it. He noticed the bruise on her jaw, the cut on her palm, and a dark smudge behind her ear that looked like dried blood. "I'm Mason," he said quietly. "My son's at home. I was just grabbing snacks." She didn't reply, but she didn't run, either. He stood. "There's coffee inside. I'll get you some. You want sugar?" Still silence. So he walked in, grabbed 2 coffees, and when he came out, she was gone. Or so he thought. Then he opened the back seat of his old Dodge Ram and found her curled up inside. "Okay," he muttered, heart thudding. This just got weird. But he didn't yell. He didn't call the cops. He shut the door softly and drove home. Mason drove through the rain, windshield wipers thudding a nervous rhythm, his mind spinning. The heater was on full blast, fogging up the windows, but he didn't dare ask her to leave. Not after seeing how she flinched when headlights passed too close. Not after noticing the faint imprint of fingers around her wrist. She hadn't said a word since slipping into the truck. And Mason hadn't asked who she was. He knew fear when he saw it. The kind of fear that didn't come from breaking the law, but from running for your life. She sat curled on the far end of the back seat, Mason's oversized coat still wrapped around her. Her shoes were muddy, socks damp, hair sticking to her face in clumps. She looked exhausted, hollow-eyed, but every so often, she'd glance toward the rearview mirror, watching the road behind them like someone expecting a monster to rise from the fog. He didn't press. He couldn't. Not with Caleb sleeping at home and the storm outside growing louder. When he pulled into the driveway, a modest one-story rental with a broken porch light, he parked slowly and glanced back. "I have a kid. He's 10. If I let you come inside, no surprises. You understand?" She nodded once. That was enough for him. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and old pizza boxes. Caleb was still asleep on the couch, hugging his worn-out plush owl. The woman, still nameless, tiptoed in like a ghost. Mason handed her a towel, a dry t-shirt of his, and pointed to the bathroom. She didn't speak, just nodded again, lips trembling. 10 minutes later, she emerged barefoot, her wet clothes folded in her arms. She looked fragile. But Mason noticed something odd. Despite her state, she moved gracefully, like someone who'd taken ballet or fencing. Not clumsy, not street-worn. Something didn't match. And her eyes, they weren't just scared. They were trained to spot danger. She looked like someone who had once lived a very different life. Still, he said nothing. He just made tea. "Name's Mason Carter," he offered again, placing the mug gently on the table. "That little guy over there's Caleb. He'll be up in a few hours looking for waffles. You can stay the night, get some rest." She looked at him then, really looked at him. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Thank you." Mason didn't reply. He just nodded and got to work laying out a blanket on the recliner. But as he turned away, he heard her whisper again, My name's Eva. It was barely audible, and it wasn't the truth. He didn't know how he knew that, but he did. Because later that night, while Mason sat on the porch drinking old coffee from a chipped mug, Caleb's voice startled him from behind the door. Dad, who's the princess on our couch? Mason's heart thumped. She's just someone who needed help, buddy. Go back to sleep. But Caleb frowned, rubbing his eyes. She looks like that girl from TV. The one who disappeared in New York. The rich one. Mason stared at him. He hadn't watched TV in days. But now he would. And what he saw next nearly made him drop his cup. There she was. On every channel. Missing. Reward posted. Desperate family crying at a press conference. Her real name? Genevieve Hartley. Heiress to $1 billion shipping empire. And she was sleeping on his couch. Mason didn't sleep that night. He sat in the dim glow of the kitchen, eyes glued to his old television, watching every news anchor repeat the same story with different urgency. Genevieve Hartley, 27, sole heiress of the Hartley global freight dynasty, vanished 2 days ago from a gala in Manhattan. Her family has offered a $10 million reward for information leading to her safe return. Pictures flashed, her laughing on red carpets, stepping out of limousines, shaking hands with senators. It was her. The woman curled up in his living room, wearing his t-shirt and hiding behind his son's old blanket, was the missing heiress the entire country was searching for. But what chilled Mason even more than the headlines were the comments from her family. If anyone's holding her for ransom, said her father, Sterling Hartley, his voice cold despite the trembling hands, please know you're endangering someone precious. Please just let her go. Her fiancé stood beside him. Blake Donovan. Chiseled jaw, eyes that didn't flinch once. If you're watching this, Jen, he said, I love you. Come home. But something about him made Mason's stomach twist, a gut feeling he couldn't shake. He turned off the TV and sat there in the silence, hearing the faint creak of the hallway where Eva had gone back to sleep. He should have called the cops. He should have done the right thing. Instead, he stood, poured himself a third cup of coffee, and stared into the darkness. The next morning, Caleb bounced into the kitchen, half asleep but grinning, and spotted her sitting at the table. Do you want strawberry or chocolate waffles? He asked brightly. Genevieve. No. Eva looked up, startled. Strawberry, she whispered. Her voice cracked, like she hadn't spoken in weeks. You got it. Caleb cheered, dashing off. She turned to Mason. He's a good kid. He is, Mason said. He doesn't know who you are. She went quiet, and for a long moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the old wall clock. Then she said softly, If I told you everything, would you believe me? Mason met her eyes. Try me. She stared at her hands, trembling slightly. My name is Genevieve Hartley, but I haven't been that person in years. Not really. Not since my mother died, and my father handed me over like a business transaction. He wanted me to marry Blake. Merge the Hartley fortune with the Donovan tech empire. I didn't love him, but I did what I was told. Until, she swallowed hard, until I found out they were going to fake a kidnapping. My own kidnapping, just to drive up share prices. They were going to use me like bait. Let me vanish for a week, maybe 2. Then rescue me just in time for the company's quarterly report. Mason froze. Except, she continued, her voice cracking, I overheard the truth. It wasn't a stage kidnapping. It was a hit. A real one. They were going to make sure I never came back. Mason's chest tightened. Ooh, she looked up at him, eyes glossy. My father. And Blake. The room went still. He believed her. He didn't want to, but he did. Because everything about her, the bruises, the silence, the way she slept with one eye open, screamed survivor. And now, she was hunted. She looked at him then, with a trembling bottom lip. You should turn me in. It's safer that way. For you. For your son. Mason didn't flinch. You're not going anywhere. She blinked. I don't care who you are. I don't care what kind of storm you dragged in. You needed help. That's all that matters. Tears welled in her eyes. Real ones. Not the kind you see on red carpets. Thank you, she whispered. Mason stood. But if they're coming for you, I need to know what we're up against. Because I'm not letting them get near Caleb. Or you. At that moment, Caleb reappeared in his Spider-Man pajamas, holding a tray of burnt waffles. Genevieve smiled, her first real one. And Mason knew in his gut, this wasn't just some good deed anymore. This was war. 3 days. That's how long Genevieve, Eva, had been in Mason Carter's house. 3 days of borrowed safety, of whispered confessions in the kitchen, of helping Caleb with spelling homework and making grilled cheese like she'd done it her whole life. 3 days of watching the storm roll toward them with every passing hour. Because they were being watched. Mason noticed it first. A dark SUV parked 2 blocks away. Never the same driver. Never there for more than 15 minutes. Then came the power flickers at exactly 9:37 p.m. 2 nights in a row. Too exact. Too intentional. But it was Caleb's offhand comment that confirmed Mason's gut feeling. "Dad," the boy had said while brushing his teeth, "why do the garbage guys take pictures of our mailbox now?" Mason didn't answer. He couldn't. Genevieve was being hunted, and someone had finally caught her scent. They were out of time. That night, after Caleb was asleep, Genevieve sat across from Mason at the small kitchen table, legs pulled into her chest, hair tied back in a messy bun. The same old hoodie clung to her shoulders like armor. She looked younger without makeup, haunted, but calmer. "You ever wonder what it's like," she murmured, "to belong somewhere and still feel like you're trespassing?" Mason leaned forward. "Every damn day." She chuckled quietly. Then, her voice changed. "I need to disappear, Mason. For good this time. No, I can't keep hiding in your house like a ghost. I'm putting your son in danger. Don't you dare use Caleb as an excuse to leave." Her eyes welled. "I'm not leaving because I want to," she whispered. "I'm leaving because they won't stop. And if they find me here, they'll burn everything down to make sure I vanish." Mason's voice was low, dangerous. "Then let's make them come. On our terms." Genevieve blinked. "What are you saying?" "I used to be recon," he said. "Marine Corps. 2 tours in Kandahar. I've dealt with worse than corporate assassins in $1,000 suits. You never told me. You never asked." She stared at him for a long time. "What would you even do?" Mason stood and walked to the garage. When he returned, he was holding a dusty wooden box. Inside were military patches, a rusted knife, and a flash drive labeled Last Mission, Fallujah. He dropped the drive on the table. "I've got friends. Ones who owe me favors. You still have the original emails Blake sent you? The recordings?" She nodded slowly. "Then it's time to go public." "No. Mason, that's suicide. Not if we control the narrative. You want to disappear? Fine. But first, we burn the lies down behind you." By morning, Mason had made 6 encrypted copies of the files. One was mailed to a reporter in D.C. Another was slipped into a donation box at the local news station. 2 more were uploaded to off-grid servers he hadn't used since discharge. The rest, stored in his locked truck glove compartment under the floorboard. That evening, they got their first message. A small envelope slid under the front door. No stamp. No address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with one sentence. "We know where she is. You have 48 hours to give her back." Mason didn't show it to her. He just walked into the living room and turned off the lights. "Eva," he said calmly, "we're leaving. Now." She didn't ask questions. She just followed him. They drove until sunrise. Out of state, through broken roads and sleepy towns, finally stopping in a remote cabin that Mason hadn't visited in years. His late uncle's place. No internet. No neighbors. Just woods, wind, and silence. But it didn't last. Not even 2 days. Because on the 3rd night, while Genevieve stood outside watching the trees sway in the moonlight, Caleb asleep in the loft, Mason heard it. The crunch of gravel. The faint hum of tires. Someone was here. He stepped outside, his old Glock in hand. Genevieve turned to him, pale. "We have to run." "No," Mason said, staring into the dark. "We stand." The headlights appeared. 3 black SUVs, just like he feared. Mason glanced at her. "If they take you, they'll kill you." She gripped his arm. "And if they take you, they'll use me to silence everything." Mason raised his gun and whispered, "Then we don't let them take either of us." The woods exploded with movement. But Genevieve was ready. Because what Blake and her father never expected was that the girl they raised to be silent had finally found her voice. And she wasn't going down without taking their lives with her. The first SUV stopped 20 feet from the cabin. Then the second. The third blocked the narrow path out, boxing them in like prey. The engines rumbled low and slow, growling in the night like wolves circling a campfire. Mason stood at the porch steps, feet planted wide, weapon lowered but ready. His face was calm, but his jaw was tight, eyes tracking every inch of the darkness. Behind him, Genevieve crouched near the door, Caleb clinging to her side upstairs, confused and groggy. The boy didn't understand why his father had suddenly put on the old combat boots, or why his backpack was stuffed with flash drives and cash. But Genevieve knew. This was the end, or the beginning, depending on who walked away. The SUV doors opened. Some men stepped out. Black coats, earpieces, hands too still, and then Blake, in a tailored gray suit, stepping lightly onto the gravel like a CEO walking toward a microphone, smiling as if this were a business deal instead of an abduction. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at her. Then, like someone ordering coffee, he said calmly, "Come home, Genevieve." Mason raised his voice. "She's not going anywhere with you." Blake barely spared him a glance. "You're nobody, soldier. This isn't your fight." Mason smiled slowly, eyes like steel. "It is now." Genevieve stepped forward. "Blake, I've sent everything. Emails, voice recordings, every document. If you touch me, if you even step onto this porch, by morning, your company's stock will crash so hard your father will choke on his champagne." Blake's jaw tensed. Then he laughed. "Oh, darling," he said, "you think that's enough? You think the board cares about a fiancé roughing up his rich girl? You think they care about threats? You're not powerful. You're alone." But she wasn't. Mason stepped down one stair. "You made a mistake, son," he said, eyes narrowing. "You came here thinking she was still scared. You thought you could finish this clean. But now you're on my turf, and I don't clean up." Blake stepped forward, and Genevieve did something no one expected. She walked past Mason, head held high, down the steps, right into the moonlight. The four men flinched, surprised. And Blake, confused, opened his mouth. But Genevieve pulled a phone from her hoodie pocket and held it up. The red light blinked. Live, streaming, broadcasting to thousands, to millions. "You want to know who this man is?" she said, voice sharp and clear. "He's the one who planned my death. The man my father partnered with. The man who told his assistant to find a body double if they couldn't make the real murder look clean enough." The camera zoomed in on Blake's face. "You're bluffing," he hissed. But Genevieve kept going. "Check your stock alerts, Blake. The video I uploaded hit 20 forums before you parked outside. The media already knows. Your board already knows. My father knows." Mason moved beside her now, standing like a wall between her and danger. "You came here thinking you were the predator," Genevieve said, voice rising, "but I stopped running, and you brought cameras to your own funeral." One of the men whispered into an earpiece. Then another stepped back. Blake turned, realizing too late. The SUVs were already reversing. One by one, tires screeched. The darkness swallowed them. Blake turned to her, red with fury. "You stupid girl. You ruined everything." He lunged, and Mason was on him in seconds. No gun, just fists. They tumbled into the gravel, Blake swinging wildly. But Mason had 2 tours behind him, and a lifetime of protecting those who needed it. It wasn't a fight. It was a message. When it was done, Blake lay gasping in the dirt, nose shattered, lips split open. "You should have stayed in your tower," Mason said. "But now you're just a man bleeding in the woods." He turned to Genevieve. "Call the police," she said calmly. "And the press. Let the world see the ending, too." 6 months later, the trial was public, brutal. Sterling Hartley was indicted for conspiracy and obstruction. Blake Donovan, charged with attempted homicide and corporate fraud, was sentenced to 15 years with no parole. Genevieve didn't attend the sentencing. She was too busy, because by then, she'd moved into a new home, smaller, quieter, full of laughter and burnt waffles. And every morning, she walked Caleb to school. Mason opened his own business, Carter Restoration, fixing homes, rebuilding after disasters. Genevieve helped manage it, using skills no boardroom ever taught her. One rainy evening, Caleb asked her if she was a princess again now that the bad guys were gone. She looked at him, smiled gently, and said, "No, baby, I was never a princess." Then she looked at Mason and whispered, "But maybe I finally found my kingdom." Mason took her hand, and for once, the silence between them wasn't about hiding. It was peace. Real, earned, and finally safe.